Welcome to the Bookshop at the End of the Internet. This podcast is dedicated to helping book lovers discover new authors. Like all the best bookshops, this podcast is filled with all kinds of books and all kinds of authors. So tune in, browse around, find a new author, and discover a new favorite book at the Bookshop at the End of the Internet. I'm Stacey Horan, author, book lover, and host of the Bookshop at the End of the Internet. This is episode number 238. For more information about this or any of our episodes, go to my website, staceyhoran.com. If you enjoy the podcast, leave us a review, like us on social media, and share us with your friends, family, and fellow readers. In today's episode of The Bookshop at the End of the Internet, I'm chatting with author Brandi Bradley about her new novel, Pretty Girls Get Away with Murder. Brandi knew she wanted to write a murder mystery set in a small southern town like the one she grew up in. At the time, a great deal of the online content she was consuming consisted of people pointing their fingers at the crazy ex-girlfriend. Combining the two, Brandi had the perfect recipe for her new book. Pretty Girls Get Away with Murder is a southern noir novel set in a small Kentucky town in which a young entrepreneur is murdered, and everyone suspects his ex-girlfriend of killing him. The story revolves around three women: the victim's ex-girlfriend, his best friend, and the detective tasked with investigating his suspicious death. In this small town, secrets and gossip run rampant, but the truth is buried in there somewhere. In this episode, I'll chat with Brandi about her writing journey, the appeal of using gossip as a tool for writing stories, and why she creates playlists for each of her main characters, as well as a few other things. Coming up. Brandi Bradley, I want to thank you very much for joining me today on the podcast.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
I thought what we could do today is start by talking about your new book, Pretty Girls Get Away with Murder. If you don't mind, tell us a little bit about this book and what inspired you to write it.
So, I'm going to start with what inspired me. I think that at the time I started working on this novel, I knew I wanted to write a murder mystery. And I knew that I was consuming a lot of content where people were pointing fingers at the crazy ex-girlfriend. And so I wanted to play around with this idea. So the book is about a young man who's an entrepreneur in this small southern town, it's a college town, and he is murdered. And they call in the detectives, and my detective is Detective Lindy Darno. And her partner Boggs are trying to figure out who killed this young man in his shower. And immediately everyone starts pointing fingers at his ex-girlfriend, who is this fitness influencer. And she's a little woo-woo, I guess is how often I describe her, where she believes in making miracles. She believes in building her brand. She believes in the universe is going to make it happen. And in a small southern town, that's just like, well, that's just crazy. Who is this woman? And so the victim's best friend is the opposite of that. She's a young woman who is very rational and very I guess it's very southern, middle of the road. There's a right and there's a wrong. There's a black and there's a white. Kind of like lives in these spaces, and she takes care of everybody. Like, she is the mom of the group, so she's always the person who makes sure that everybody's safe. And then Ethan was not safe, and so she carries a lot of guilt about what happened. And at the same time, I have this great detective who is she's a gay detective in Western Kentucky, which brings its own issues. And she married a local girl, and they had a baby, and they procured sperm from a friend. And now all of a sudden he is very much in their lives. And it's making my detective, Lindy, very nervous about her status as a parent when the biological father is all of a sudden on the scene and like what that's going to mean for their family. And so, yeah, so it's got a lot of layers. It has a lot going on, but it is very much a murder mystery. Who killed this guy? What happened?
Good. Well, let's talk about the influence that you had consuming all this content,
Yes.
where it was the crazy ex-girlfriend that seemed to
Yes.
be the subject of all of this. Was there a spark at any point? Something where you thought, okay, this is what I'm going to build the book around, this idea.
Well, I think I think I really kind of fell in love with the crazy ex-girlfriend as a character because especially at that time, I was reading a lot of self-help books. And I spent a lot because I was in grad school and I was finishing my previous book and I was thinking about what was next. And I was under a lot of like anxiety about what am I going to do after I graduate and getting a job and making a career as a novelist. And so I was seeking out a lot of self-help books that basically told me that I was pretty and I can accomplish anything that I want. And I'm like, well, I love that. Like that makes me feel better. And I could see the way that you can kind of get sucked up into this world of self-improvement and self-help. And I think that that really sparked a lot of these ideas with this character who, has this belief structure where it's like the universe is going to make it happen. All I have to do is put it out there. And then, how that kind of twists to, no, no, I am going to make it happen kind of determination, and how you can kind of cross that line from, I am owed all of this. I've worked so hard to now I'm going to take it kind of idea. So I could see how that idea of, I can accomplish everything to I will accomplish everything can go from this very safe, look at you, you're inspired, to very controlling and very manipulative and very like overwhelming. And I just really enjoyed playing around with that with the character. And then I also had another character who was very much like that, who, as the best friend, who was also very controlling and very type A and liked things a certain way. So I liked having these women that had so much similarities, but also all of this disdain and judgment toward each other. And then there's this guy in the middle who loves them both, and they both love this guy. There's something about this guy, like one loves him as a friend, the other one loves him as more, and they have like all of these similarities, but they are just like constant judgments of how the other one goes about in the world. And that was so much fun to write in their voices like that, where they are just so cutting toward each other and so dismissive and so see each other as such a challenge.
Yeah.
So that was so much fun. Yeah.
And so the book is told from the different perspectives, and there's three
Yes.
main characters. So Gabby,
Yes.
the
So
ex
Gabby
girlfriend.
is the ex-girlfriend. Yes, Gabby is the ex-girlfriend, and Jenna is the best friend. And I did theirs in first person so I could really live in their voices, which I normally don't do. I normally feel a little unease writing in first person and embodying that first person type of familiarity. Like even with my characters, I created them. I love them so much, but at the same time, I'm like, I don't know how comfortable I am in your skin kind of thing. And so I took the risk and I did that this time. So that was so much fun to write in those voices. And then for my detective, Lindy, it's from her point of view, but I didn't want to do first person because I didn't want to invade her thoughts. She is trying to figure out a puzzle. I wanted to give her that space to be able to do that and not direct it in that way. And so, yeah, so it's told in three different perspectives. Some are very close and very intimate, and some of them are less so. And I think that that fits their personalities too, because, Gabby is very like she's on social media all the time. She's always putting herself like in she loves attention. She loves those spaces. And Jenna is more like the gossipy friend in the office who you would sit with and close the door and really dish with. And so I felt like, okay, so they're intimate in different ways, but you can feel comfortable being in their skin a little bit. So that was the approach when I was writing those characters.
Well, let's talk about setting, because you set your stories in sort of southern locales. I'm curious, why? What is it that draws you there? And then I also want to talk about this idea of Southern noir. But let's talk about why you choose kind of the locations you choose for your stories.
Well, I choose small towns because I guess because I grew up in a small town. It was it wasn't even a one traffic light town. We had a nice little four-way stop and that was about it. So I understood kind of like small town politics, the lines that you cross, the dynamics. And then when I went away to college, I went away to a college town, a very small college town and stayed there even after I graduated and worked for the newspapers there. So I developed a sense of like, okay, this is how it works, right? And the way that it works in small towns is not how it works anywhere else. They have their own rules and they have their own priorities and they have their own values and they have their own ways of cutting people out or serving their own justice or like places where they everybody knows that the shading dealings go on over there, but as long as it's on the outskirts, then nobody's going to say anything, like nobody's going to get involved. So that's something that I get because I was around it for so long, working as a journalist and just living in these spaces. And, and I think it goes back to the right what you know. But also, as somebody who like left home at a very young age and moved like bigger cities every step. So I went from my one stop sign town to a place that actually had traffic lights, to a place that had even more traffic lights and even more. And now I live in Atlanta, and there's not much more big city than Atlanta. And so, and as I kind of like elevated up, I think there was like a noticing in my writing groups and exchanging documentation and changing stories and things like, oh, well, you don't see a lot of representation in the bigger, larger magazines or venues or booksellers and things like that that take place in small southern towns. So it was another way of me wanting to kind of like represent a geographical area that often gets overlooked. I mean, when you think about certain like TV shows or certain like even podcasts or certain things, that are set in the South, you can see like there's not that many. Either they're very cutesy and it's all very quaint in a very Sweet Home Alabama kind of way, or it's very gritty and dark and, like Justified or Ozarks, where, they're very like looking into that seedy side. And the thing is, every time one pops up, I'm like, yes, I'm going to watch this. I can't wait to watch this. I'm super invested. Do I know any of these people? Did they shoot this anywhere near me? Like getting
Right.
kind of like just happy to see representation of these type of geographical areas. So I guess that whenever it's like, okay, so you're going to write another book, where's this going to be set? Like, oh, well, even if it was fictional, it would probably be like a small southern town or something.
Well, let's talk about this idea of Southern noir, because a lot of people, when they think of the noir genre, it is a more urban setting. It's usually dark and gritty and often based in a certain maybe time element to it, but it's not. Most people don't think of, say, a small southern town would play host to a noir story. But what is it about this sort of recognition that Southern locales can very much be a perfect setting for that type of a story?
Well, I think that when we think about noirs, we often think of LA and you're talking about a certain time period. So it's always that jazz era post-war. Anyway, it was a post-war thing, right? And so whenever someone's like, oh, you like noir, are you reading Raymond Chandler? Are you reading Dashiell Hammett? Are you reading like these things where it's like as if it can't exist now? And so when I started decide it was an evolution to even for me to find my genre because at first I was just really trying to write very literary things and then it's like oh no I actually love crime writing so I was just like okay so we're going to be a crime writer and so I started studying and kind of doing a self audit like what are the stories that I like what are the stories that I want to write what is inspiring me what is that about and they almost always came back to noirs and noirs can actually take place in lots of different settings. Like there's actually more of a loose idea of what the noir means, but when you say it, or God forbid you try to look for like Google images for it, it's like almost always the detective in the trench coat with the hat and the, this whole like Humphrey Bogart thing, which I love. I do love all of that. But there are just certain elements that you need. And I think what most of them come back to is you have this large body that kind of controls things. You have this one person on the outside trying to investigate something, and that controlling body is shutting them down. And there is always, there's a femme fatale. There is, someone who has died or someone who's in trouble, and people are just not wanting to say what's going on because there is this controlling body that kind of makes sure that people are on the out. So if you think about like, Chinatown, this is the rich and the powerful, they're keeping the water from the people kind of thing. So, and it's always like two stories, like a bigger story and a smaller story. Now, if you ever saw Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, they're like in it's two stories, but it's just one story kind of thing. And I always laugh whenever I see that because that's the great thing about reading is when you watch it's like, oh, it was a mystery that involving like a young man who died, but oh no, it's also about this corruption thing that's going on. And I always love that moment when they collide. So yeah, so I think that that can take place in southern small towns because as much as southern small towns are, quiet in some places, there's a reason. There are like a lot of people are very invested in keeping our small town very quiet and nobody paying attention. And let's not talk about that there is a seedier side, or there is crime, or that there is people who are more invested in their own selfish acts than taking care of these actual people. And if everybody's just very quiet, seems very happy, everybody's going to be okay. So I think southern towns are perfect for that. Also, a million places where you can hide out, places that you can disappear, places where you can have clandestine meetings. They don't always have to happen in like parking garages. A barn way out in the country is terrifying and shady and going into the belly of the beast kind of thing. So I actually I kind of get excited when I think about like, oh, I have so many possibilities out in the wilderness here that a lot of people would dismiss. The only problem is there are a lot of logistics that you have to think about. If you're writing a noir in an urban setting, things are very close, or you can like get a train or public transportation. If I'm doing a noir out in the country, everyone has to have a vehicle and it has to be able to go off road. And you have to think about the geography of the place. Like I had to rewrite half of the book because I had two characters living way too far away from each other for the logistics of all the puzzle pieces to happen. So I had to go back and have to rewrite half of the book after I got halfway done and relocate that person's home into a completely separate town because it just did not make sense for them to be driving back. I actually have a remark where one of the characters say, "Are these kids made out of gasoline? How can they afford to just keep driving back and forth through these face-to-face meetings?" And that was just my joke to myself for being so silly and not thinking about the way maps work when I was actually sketching this out.
I noticed on your website you mentioned that you write crime stories, but you think that perhaps your true genre is secrets and gossip.
Yes.
So I'm curious, one, what the appeal is, what the draw is there, and why is that idea, secrets and gossip in particular, why is that such a good tool for writers?
I think that that's an excellent tool for writers because when we think about the stories that, not the ones that it's like, oh, I've loved this book since I was a child, it's beloved to me, those are great. I have those. Those are very important to me. I read Pride and Prejudice and just like, boom, mind blown. I get it. But if I'm having, in my house, instead of saying we've had a day, we'll say, no, no, it's been a day. It has been quite, a journey. We're exhausted. We need to be left alone. When we're having those things, if I'm having a day, what I want more than anything is for my best friend to text me, "Oh, girl, you're not going to believe what I just heard." Because that's me not thinking about myself anymore, not thinking about like, ugh, my boss and these things and my algorithm and the website. I'm not thinking about those things because my best friend has just texted me that there was some scandal, some gossip and it's always being revealed. It's not even like keeping the secret, but it's when it all comes out in the open. And then you can have that great debriefing of the events that happened, what stories were told, what people thought, who is most shocked by this news. And of course, my best friend was a journalist. We were both journalists on the come up at the same time. So it's not just having the news, you have to share it, and so we do love that. But I think that, there's a real appeal to hearing stories about real people and how real people mess up. And you could take it from that sense of like you're talking about people and you're judging them, or you could take it from that sense of, oh my gosh, that is news I did not know, and I'm learning so much about that person's experience. It just feels like, oh, I've never thought about it in those terms before. So I think it has a lot to do with like how you look at it. But there's just something about when a secret is being revealed that just kind of stops everybody in their tracks and everybody has to have a discussion about it. And I think that's very exciting.
Well, I'm curious, and I often ask this of, say, mystery writers. Did you know the ending when you started? Or if you did it change by the time you got there?
Yeah. Yeah. Like I always know how it's going to end.
Okay.
But I did have to make a lot of adjustments about midway through. And I think that it's because the more you get to know your people, the more it's like, oh, yeah, they're not going to do that. They're going to do something different. So you have to
Right.
like allow yourself that freedom to make those adjustments. But at the same time, I knew that I wanted it to end with two people talking on the phone, and I kept it. I kept that. I kept reworking. I'm like, I have to make sure that's how I want it to end. I feel very confident, like this is how it has to end. But at the same time, it was like, yeah, but it's not in the same context as it was. And so I had to rewrite that scene like a million times. But yeah, I almost always know like this is how it begins and this is how it ends.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about process for a bit because
Okay.
I'm curious how you write a book. I mean, it sounds like you have at least pretty clear ideas of beginning and end.
Mhm.
Are you someone who plots it all out? Do you tend to pants? Are you faithful to set writing times? Do you just write on the fly, typing away on your phone whenever you've got 5 minutes? What is your process for getting a story completed?
So when I get the idea, it's very like, oh my gosh, I have a new idea. And that's very exciting. That's the fun part, right? So when I'm like, okay, we're going to do this, I really am a plotter. And it's only because I don't like surprises and I like to be able to keep myself in with this forward momentum. And I feel like if I was a pantser because of my personality, I would burn off all of that hot energy very quickly, like binging your favorite TV show. And it's like, oh no, I'm out of seasons. Like I would do that, right? Like I know that that is just my personality. But if I can look at the full like big picture, this is the thing I want to write. These are the scenes that would need to happen to get me from beginning to end. I have a whiteboard in my offices everywhere I go. I'm like, I need a whiteboard. I got to write all this down. So I'll like map it all out, and then that way I can look at it and be like, okay, you don't have to write this whole book today. You don't even have to write this whole book in a month. You know exactly what you're going to do, so you can kind of calm down and know that you're going to get it. You're going to get it there, and feel excited about it. Excited about, oh, and then I get to write the next scene. If I know what's ahead, I can get excited about what that next scene's going to be and how I'm going to write it and how it's going to approach. Um, where it gets frustrating is like after I get all of my groundwork done, because I do a lot of off the page prep work, my outline, my timeline. So you have to think about like, okay, so when is all of this happening? It's happening in spring and summer. It takes a long time to solve a mystery. So unless you're doing like a capsule, it all happens in one night. But I mean, like most police things, it's like, yeah, it takes months, years, right? So I got to think about what seasons have passed and what holidays and what anniversaries and birthdays and, weather. I mean, like again, I read about small southern towns, but I did Western Kentucky. Western Kentucky gets tornadoes and ice, and I live there. So I'm like, you have to think about when things would get shut down or not shut down. Like all of these things go into it. So I like to have kind of like an idea of all of that. And then I always do a playlist For every book, I do a playlist because I like to think about what would my characters be listening to. So that kind of helps me get into their headspace, especially if I'm writing from their point of view. Like I have all of those on Spotify. And it's on Brandi Bradley on Spotify. So I've got my Gabby playlist, which also had a lot of Jenna inspired songs on there as well. And then for my previous book, I had two playlists, one for the mother character and one for the daughter character. And so I would think about like what would they be listening to while they're driving around, or what are they listening to when they go to the gym or at their office spaces. And so when I get all of that groundwork done, and to be clear, a person can live in the foundational part of writing for like ever. Like I've talked to other writers and they're like, I'm building this very intricate world. I'm like, how long have you been doing that? 2 years. I'm like, it's time to start writing the book. You gotta get going on this. They're like, no, 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 no. I still have all of this stuff to figure out. I'm like, you can figure it out on the fly. You can figure it out on the way. You've got to write, so I try to set a little like, okay, I'm going to actually start writing scenes like at this point. And then I'll try to take it a scene a day, and I'll do what I call scene sketching. So everything happens in with a pen and paper longhanded before it actually gets typed into a computer. And I will sketch a scene, get the ideas, how's it going to end, beginning, end, dialogue, where people are standing. It's very rough, and I'll do that in like my journal. And then the next day I'll type it, and that's kind of like how I'll do it. And if I'm like on a crush to get, like that rush to get to a deadline, I'll be like, okay, we got to do 2 scenes today, or we got to do 3 scenes, or sometimes things will get backed up where it's like I have all these scenes to type. I have all these sketches, I have all these scenes to type because that's not as much fun as the sketching. The sketching is the best part.
Right.
And then, eventually it takes forever. But eventually, like all the scenes get typed and everything's ready. And it's like, okay, it's done. And then there's that panic because it's like, oh no, now I have to show somebody and go through that process of sharing it. Because I used to share chapter by chapter with people as it was going. And I've kind of stopped doing that because I think when you share chapter by chapter, and I know people would agree with me, and I know people are very enthusiastic, especially their first novel, to like share, like, this is what I'm doing every day. And I went through that experience as well. But eventually it becomes, all right, what did you think of this chapter? And they're like, well, I don't understand this. Don't worry, don't worry, don't worry. You'll know it. I was just like, you know what, just give them the whole book. And that way, at the end, they can be like, okay, I didn't understand this part. I wasn't clear about this one. I didn't know about this. And then I can make those initial adjustments to it. So it
Right.
goes through a lot of drafting process too.
Yeah.
So after I get the foundation done and it is time to write those scenes and get those things sketched, I do have a space at home where I try to write. But because of how my schedule works, I don't have unlimited amounts of time to just sit and ponder and write scenes. So I have a tendency to write on the go. And definitely with my first novel, I didn't have a designated writing space. So I would spend a lot of time writing in my car, writing at a Panera because they have Wi-Fi, or any type of coffee shop, and just kind of like, before my workday begins or after my workday ends, just pulling in somewhere and just seeing what I can get accomplished. And sometimes I only have an hour for that. And so I try to keep a lot of my writing things with me. So either my laptop or my tablet, because it's got a keyboard. And I will just set up like wherever I can, and then just set the timer for myself for an hour and just see what I can accomplish. And what's great about that is it's that focused. I don't have all day. I only have an hour. Let's see what's possible. And so that drives me a little bit more because I don't have, that build up. Like I've done that thing sometimes, like on a Saturday, where like I'm going to write all morning. And then I'm doing laundry and I'm organizing things and I'm talking to the kids about stuff, or I have that third cup of coffee. And then it's like, oh, I was going to write all morning and it's noon. So if I have these little things where it's like, okay, I have an hour, like a sprint, more or less. If I have this writing sprint, I feel like I can be more focused. I can justify turning my phone on silent for an hour because, whatever's going to happen in an hour I can't fix, you know. So yeah, so I feel fine like turning off my phone, putting on my, my playlist or like my soundscapes and just seeing what I can get done in like that little space. So I really have to carve out time in the margins, but I feel like I'm more productive in those times, so I feel like it's totally worth it.
Mm. That's good advice. Do you apply that to the foundational process as well, or is that strictly for the drafting?
No, that's for all of it.
For
So
all of it.
foundational process and everything. But what's great about the foundational process is it's all new. So it's very easy to be like, oh, I was going to do this for an hour. I've been here an hour and a half. My husband's calling me. And that's kind of fun too, because you get lost in time a little bit and you're just like, kind of like gone in that. The most awesome part of creating anything is the beginning stages. It's just like falling in love. It's just awesome.
Yeah, yeah. And are you a fan of editing? Do you have what is your relationship with the editing process?
I don't feel like no, I have a very uncomfortable relationship with the editing process. And I've learned a lot about what that comes from. And there are lots of different things. I was a journalist for a long time. Journalists don't always edit their own stuff. You just type it up, get as best you can. You got another guy for that. And when I was very young, an editor would sit with me and I was like, okay, so you have a tendency to do these things. Why don't you work on these on your own? And I didn't take that criticism very well. And I don't know why. I just felt very much like, no, no, that's not my job, right? Like your job is edit, my job is to write. It was a very immature way of looking at it. It could have been a really big growth experience, you know? And then as I got older and I was like working on fiction, which is completely different, but I would work on fiction and then I'd be like, okay, so you've written this novel, now you've got to go back and edit it. I was like, oh, I don't want to do that. I don't want to go back. And what I've learned is there are lots of different types of perfectionism. And one of the ways of perfectionism that we do not talk about is not that everything has to be perfect, but that you just can't deal with the fact that you didn't know that that was wrong. Like catching yourself in like tiny things, like little errors, like you can't emotionally deal with it. So I've had to like learn a lot about the fact that you know that the flaws are there. You just got to go back in and fix them. But I think I reverted back into old habits. I have people that I pay to edit my books. So like I do all the writing and so much of it is my own, but I have a developmental editor and they give me advice. And then I had a great copy editor who went through it with a fine tooth comb, and that's very helpful for me. When I was in my grad program, I would turn in things to my mentor, and they said, "You really need to take a grammar class because this is a mess, and I am really shocked that you have made it this far without this basic grammar knowledge." And I'm like, "Oh, that stings." Okay. So I ended up like trying to self-teach myself grammar over again as an adult because I'm like, if we're going to do this, let's do it, you know?
Right,
So,
right.
yes. So I've learned a lot, but I also know that I don't have the eyes for it. I don't have that attention to detail on that level. I need somebody to like help me. And so, yes, so I have a copy editor that really goes through my stuff for me.
Yeah,
I like working with a team that way.
yeah. Well, and you teach writing, right? So your background is in that. I'm curious, it sounds like the experience of teaching it, you have found, is different from the actual experience of doing it. So would you
Oh,
say you are, if you were one of your students, would you be a good student? Do you follow direction? Do you do what it is that you're teaching your students to do?
I will say this. I love being a teacher. I love teaching creative writing. It's so much fun for me. And I love giving them advice and I love like steering them in certain directions and I love like that process. It's so much fun. And when I was a very, very young writer, if I was a student, like, now, I think that I would probably be very much like many of the students I come across where they're like, just let me do my thing and leave me alone until it's done, like like you need to like clear a path for them, right? And you can't really tell them anything. I think I was talking to somebody about this, like trying to talk to a young person about their writing sometimes is like trying to talk to a bride about their wedding. They have all these ideas and they want it to be perfect and they think everybody's going to love it, and no matter what they tell you, you just got to sit there and be like, okay, Okay, all right, because there's no reasoning with them, you know. So no, I don't think I'm a great student because I'm just so determined. This is what I want to do, and this is what I want to make, and this is how it needs to be. And if they disagree with me, I push back a little bit. I'm like, no, because it does need to be like this because of this. I had great mentors who I worked with who would let me believe things that were incorrect or probably not going to work out great for me as a writer because they sensed really early on she's not going to know until she falls down. And they gave me that space to do that. And I really appreciate that they let me do that. Like they didn't micromanage me and they were like, okay, you just keep believing that and we'll see what happens. And then when I learned to be like, oh yeah, yeah, they were right. I wasn't listening. So that's on me. I get that.
Well, do you have works in progress? Are you working on a book? Do you have a list of books you want to write? Do you just pick the shiniest, one brightest, shiniest, loudest one of them and start that one? What's going on now
You know,
that
I
this book is out?
I really wish I had the time and space and the bandwidth because to chase every butterfly because they're so appealing. Like the new shiny things are always like, oh, but you're the new shiny thing. I'm so excited. So whenever I know that the next book is the thing I need to write about is when I just can't shake the idea where it just kind of like lives with me. But every once in a while, I'll get like a little shiny, little like sparkly little butterfly that flies by, and I'm like, oh, I want to go catch it, and it'll be a short story. I have a short story that's in progress that a friend of mine is copy editing for me. And I have another short story that is in the works. And then I do have another novel that I'm about to start. I'm in the lay the foundation part for it. So I knew that when I was working on Pretty Girls, I already had an idea about what the next novel would be, but I had to finish Pretty Girls first because I knew that I wanted to stay in this Western Kentucky region that I'd been writing about, but I didn't want to do a sequel. I didn't want to do another detective procedural. I wanted to try something different. And I wanted to do like amateur detective. So the new one is kind of based on this amateur detective who moves into this small town to restore a home. And it's a very quiet, sleepy, antiquing town that's just surrounded by fields and weather and things. And she gets pulled in on a disappearance case. A young man has disappeared in this community, and it's one of those like everybody in the community is coming together and like printing T-shirts and walking the fields and looking for some type of evidence. Because when boys go missing, it's not like when young women go missing. And there's an argument to be like when most people go missing, there isn't a lot of like media associated with it unless you're like a Gabby Petito or something. So thinking about with young men, especially because of how we are, where these ideas that young men are just going to go roam and sow their wild seeds. If a young man goes missing, a lot of times they're like, he has every right to go missing. He's an adult and this is America and people can just disappear. And sometimes boys need to do that. And it's been really interesting, like reading about disappearance cases of young men, especially young men coming out of adolescence when, you know, their bodies are still changing and their brains are still developing and they're experimenting with different things. And they just, you know, they go off the road and there's never seen again. There's been a couple of them that I've followed where it's like, you know, they just didn't look for these boys because they just assumed that boys are going to do what boys are going to do. And I'm a mother of sons, so I think that's why it, you know, really kind of like digs in a little bit. So I was really thinking about like the moms and how they just don't let go and how hard it is when you have to accept it. And so I wanted an outsider's perspective to investigate the case with the assistance of a local person who has ties to the family in this small southern town. I'm giving you so much of my brain space all of a sudden. But yeah, so that's like what inspired it, you know.
Okay.
And so yeah, so I'm going to be working on that. I don't know if you can get. It's kind of funny. I don't know if you can guess that at all for me talking today because I feel like I'm in my teacher brain. But because these spaces are incredibly humorous even when they're dealing with trauma. So thinking about how people like kind of like deal with their stuff, and how Southern people deal with their stuff. So yeah, so I'm very excited about that one. But again, I'm just laying foundations right now. I'm working on like the outline and the timeline and the character sketches and like how things are gonna work out. But really I'm ambitious about this one. There might be a 3 book arc with it. So it might actually turn into a series, but at the same time, I feel like when you're in your creative space, in the early creative space, like everything sounds like a great idea. So whenever I get like those little triggers, those little glimmers of like, oh, that would be a really great story. I have a whiteboard in my studio space that I just write what the idea is, and it all sounds like gobbledygook. Like anybody on the outside would be like, I don't know what that is. So I've got female on female stalking witchy prank is an idea that's probably just going to be a short story. And then I was again talking to my best friend, and she was describing to me about someone who has set up a spray tan business in their town, and it's an artisan spray tan. So it's like, it's not where you go in the booth. Someone actually like sprays it on you. And I just could not stop thinking about the artisan spray tan experience. I'm like, that has to be a business in one of my books or stories at some point because, we're never going to stop tanning in the South. I don't know why. So I was just like, all those girls for prom, all that big business, just thinking about like like even the economics of small towns are just so very different from larger cities, or even how so many people want to make their businesses now is in like online spaces. Like I have a website, and I have a service, and I have a coaching and all of that. But small towns, it's still very much like we do hair and we do spray tans and we do nails and we have restaurants, and it's just so different.
Yeah. Yeah. So thank goodness for gossip because it at least gives you story ideas.
Absolutely. Oh no, like anytime, like I love it when I get a text message, like you're not going to believe what happened. You're not going to believe this person I met. Sometimes people just send me like names of people who they've met just to add to the name file inside of all of the books because names are kind of hard. Eventually, they all just like everyone's named with the same initial, or they're like all the women are Amanda. Like you get kind of like stuck and out of ideas. So yeah, like sometimes like someone will send me a name, and I'm like, oh, here's my description of what that person's name makes me think that they look like, kind of thing. And so that's always fun.
Yeah. Oh, very good. Well, if people want to learn more about you and your books, look for the new release, all that sort of thing, where can they go to find you?
So I am to be found on brandibradley.com. So that's BrandibRadley.com. And that is a space where I sell my books, but also I have short stories that are available. And every week I post on my blog. So I post about writing, the creative mindset, writing about crime. Sometimes I'll write about true crime things that I will see, or like documentaries that I'm watching that are kind of like triggering ideas for me. So like I'll do like a full like assessment on it. Also, or because I am a plotter and because I do teach and I'm a mom and I write books, my time is very important. So I spend a lot of time organizing my time and my planners and organization systems and things like that. So sometimes I'll just talk about organizing and post things like that. Because when you write novels, you have to make that time for it. And that's why so many people are like, oh, I'll write one when I retire. And I'm like, well, I don't want to wait. So I'm going to fit it into my life the best way that I can. So yeah, so I'll write about things like that. But yeah, so if you want to learn more about me and my books, the website it's the best place to do it. I have social media, but it's not the same. I put my heart in that website.
Good. And if people want to purchase a copy of your book, your website is the best place to go?
Absolutely. Go to my website. I have a shop where you can get both paperback and digital copies of my books and my short stories. But I know a lot of people just love their Kindles and their Kobus and their devices, and also Prime shipping. You can't beat it. So I am available on Amazon, barnesandnoble.com, pretty much anywhere where books are sold.
Good, good. Well, Brandy, I want to thank you very much for joining me today on the podcast. And I want to wish you luck with Pretty Girls Get Away with Murder and the work in progress. We'll look forward to that. So, congratulations on everything you've accomplished so far, and best of luck with the rest of your writing journey.
Thank you so much. And thank you for having me.
The Bookshop at the End of the Internet is a podcast dedicated to helping book lovers discover new authors. Like any good bookshop, this podcast features a wide variety of books by the equally varied and interesting authors who felt compelled to write them. This podcast gives you a chance to meet these wonderful writers and discover your next must-read book. Listen to the authors describe their books and tell you their stories in their own words. My interviews feature books from all genres and authors from all walks of life, including those who are indie published as well as those published by small presses and large publishing houses. Looking for unique, not so easy to find books for yourself, a friend, or a book club? Tune into this podcast and find your newest favorite author or maybe a soon-to-be bestseller. This podcast, like all the best bookshops, is filled with all kinds of books and all kinds of authors. Tune in, browse around, find a new author, and discover a new favorite book. You never know what treasures you might find in the Bookshop at the End of the Internet.